There is a small 40-second scene in the Season 3 episode The Zigerian Morty Date, where Rick Sanchez, given every chance to walk away from his family forever, simply cannot do it. He tries, he stalls, he drifts in space. The show does not comment on it. Rick does not comment on it. It just sits there, in the middle of an episode, quietly telling the truth about who he is. Most people picture Rick and Morty as a loud show. Burping, yelling, aliens exploding. The story underneath the noise is much quieter. A man who lost his wife and daughter to a bomb in his garage, 40 years of revenge, a grandson who never quite knew what his grandfather was running from, a wall built around the multiverse, a boy in an eye patch, and 4 strange theories fans have been chewing on for over a decade. Welcome to Ricktopus. Let's begin. The pre-series tragedy. Diane, Rick Prime, and the bomb in the garage. Long before the burping, the portal guns, the talking dogs, the pickle, and the grandson dragged out of bed at 3 in the morning, there was a quiet little house in a quiet little dimension where a man named Rick Sanchez was just a husband and a father. He had a wife, her name was Diane. He had a daughter, her name was Beth. And for a while, that was the whole story. This dimension would later be given a name, Dimension C137. The number means nothing on its own. It is just a label, the way a page in a book gets a number stamped on it. What matters is what was inside it. A house, a garage, a man who liked to tinker with science problems in his spare time, a wife who loved him, a small daughter with messy hair and a loud laugh, a regular life, in other words. The kind of life Rick would never have again, and the kind he would spend the next 40 years pretending he never wanted in the first place.
Back then, Rick was a working scientist. Smart, but not the smartest man in the universe. Not yet. He was trying to crack a problem that had stumped him for years. He wanted to figure out a way to travel between different versions of reality. Not space travel, something deeper. He wanted to step from one whole world into another whole world, the way most people step from one room into another room. He had the idea, he just could not finish the math. Diane knew about his work. She loved him through it. She was patient with him in the way that partners are patient with people who get lost inside their own heads. Beth was small enough that her father was still her favorite person in the world, the way fathers usually are when daughters are very young, before life gets in the way and starts to dent that feeling. Rick would scribble in his notebook in the garage. Diane would call him in for dinner. Beth would crawl around on the floor next to his workbench. It was, by every measure that matters, a happy home. And then, one afternoon, a portal opened in the garage. A man stepped out. The man looked exactly like Rick. Same hair, same face, same voice, same slouch, same lab coat. He was, in every way that the eye could see, Rick Sanchez. But he was not. He was another version of Rick from a different reality. A Rick who had already cracked the problem. A Rick who had already built the portal gun. A Rick who had already left his own family behind to go wandering through every world he could find. This other Rick, the one who came through the portal, would later be called Rick Prime. The name does not mean he was the first Rick or the most important one. It is a nickname the show landed on later. What it means in plain English is that he was the original portal traveler, the seed. The Rick who, before any other Rick, figured out how to crack reality open and walk through it. He had taken to visiting other versions of himself across the worlds. He had a habit of it. He would track down a Rick who had not yet finished the portal gun and offer him a shortcut. Take the technology. Skip the years of work. Come with me. Leave your boring little life behind. We can be gods together. There are infinite versions of us out there, and the only thing keeping us from running the whole show is each other. That was the offer he made to Rick C137 that day in the garage. And Rick C137, the husband, the father, the man who had a wife in the kitchen and a daughter on the floor, said no. He turned it down. Not because he was scared, not because he could not understand the offer. He understood it perfectly. He turned it down because he did not want it. He had a wife he loved. He had a daughter he adored. He had a life that was small and ordinary and his. The portal gun could wait. The other worlds could wait. He was happy. Rick Prime did not take it well. The show has come back to this moment more than once over the years, and each time it lingers a little longer on what happened in Rick Prime's face when he heard the word no. Surprise, first, then something that looked like an insult. A version of himself, a lesser Rick by his own thinking, was looking him in the eye and saying that family was worth more than the whole multiverse. To Rick Prime, that was not just a refusal, it was a personal attack. It meant his own choice to walk away from his Diane and his Beth had been the wrong choice. It meant he had given up something real for something hollow, and he could not stand the thought. So he made sure Rick C137 would never get to keep what he had chosen. Sometime after that visit, a portal opened again in Rick's garage. Rick was not in the room. Diane and Beth were. A bomb dropped through the portal and went off. The blast killed both of them instantly. Rick came running. He found his wife and his daughter dead in the wreckage of the only life he had ever wanted. He was hurt himself, badly enough that an ambulance came. He spent some time recovering. The show does not say how long. It says only that he came
came home to an empty house. And he stayed there for a while, and he grieved. Then he got back to work. He finished the portal gun on his own. He did the math, this time without help, this time without anyone calling him in for dinner. And when the gun was done, he picked it up and he stepped through, and he started looking for the man who had killed his family. This is the moment that the entire show is built on top of. Every joke, every adventure, every loud chase scene, every quiet, sad moment, every season finale, every fight, every reconciliation, every drunk monologue Rick has ever delivered. All of it sits on top of this one event in the garage. A man said no to a stranger who looked like him. The stranger killed his wife and his daughter. The man went looking for him. The looking took a long time. Rick was not the only Rick chasing Rick Prime. Other versions of him in other worlds had received the same offer, said the same no, and lost their own Dianes the same way. A whole quiet army of broken Ricks were out there, all of them grieving, all of them angry, all of them hunting the same man. Rick Prime saw them coming. He built a weapon to handle the problem. The weapon was meant to wipe a single person out of every version of reality at once, so completely that even the memory of the person started to fade in the minds of the people who had loved them. He used the weapon on Diane. Not just Rick C137's Diane. Every Diane. In every world. All of them. Gone. In a single moment. And not only gone, fading. The people who had known her began to lose her in pieces. Her face would slip. Her voice would get harder to hear in their heads. Her hand in their hand would feel less and less real the longer time went on. This is why, in the show, Diane has always been a kind of shadow. A name. A feeling. A photograph that never quite stays in focus. The weapon did not just kill her. It started to erase the shape she had left behind in everyone who remembered her. Rick kept hunting anyway. Decades passed. He killed countless other versions of himself along the way, sometimes by accident, sometimes because they got in the way of the search, sometimes because he could not always tell the difference between Rick Prime and a stranger who happened to look like him. He drank heavily. He picked up the famous flask. He started saying a phrase he would later use as a kind of a joke. Wubba lubba dub dub. His old friend Bird Person would one day translate it. It does not mean anything cheerful. It means I am in great pain. He met people in those years. Bird Person, Squanchy, a handful of others who knew him before the family on the show ever did. Some of them knew about Diane. Some of them knew about Rick Prime. Most of them did not press him about either. He worked with rebellions. He fought against a galaxy-wide government called the Galactic Federation. He helped build a giant station in space where every Rick from every reality could live together and stop killing each other. He even helped come up with a way to lock himself and all his other selves inside a curated chunk of the multiverse where he was always the smartest man in the room. The full meaning of that choice would not become clear for a very long time. Through all of it, he never found Rick Prime. Eventually, he did something strange. He tracked down the original world that Rick Prime had come from. Not to fight him there. Rick Prime was long gone, off in the multiverse somewhere. Rick C137 went there to wait. He thought, maybe, if he sat in the killer's empty home long enough, the killer might one day come back to it. So he settled in. He moved into the dimension where Rick Prime had once lived. He found the family Rick Prime had abandoned. A Beth who had grown up without her father, married to a man named Jerry, with 2 kids of her own, a teenage girl named Summer, and a teenage boy named Morty. He showed up on their doorstep one day, claiming to be the grandfather they had not seen in 20 years. They let him in. That is where the show begins. Everything that has ever happened on screen, from the first burp in the pilot to the last frame of the most recent finale, happens in a house that is not really Rick's house, with a daughter who is not really his daughter, in a dimension that is not really his dimension. He is a man who has been quietly squatting in the life of his worst enemy for years, raising someone else's grandson, eating someone else's food, sleeping in someone else's garage, waiting for a man who never comes home, drinking from a flask, telling a 14-year-old to come on adventures with him because the alternative is being alone in a house that does not belong to him, with his memories slowly being erased by a weapon he cannot find. The pain came first. The portals came second. The grandson came much, much later, almost as an afterthought, a kind of accidental new family that Rick stumbled into while trying to track the person who had taken his real one. A lot of the show makes more sense once that timeline is in place. The drinking, the cruelty, the way Rick treats almost every relationship like it is going to get yanked away from him at any second. The way he sometimes looks at Beth with an expression that does not quite match the daughter standing in front of him. The way he keeps his guard up, even with people who clearly love him. The way he has never, in any episode, ever, willingly said the word Diane out loud unless something has forced him to. He is not really a mad scientist. He is a widower with a portal gun. That is the heart of it. The whole rest of the show is built on top of one quiet quiet, ordinary man who said no to a stranger in his garage one afternoon and lost everything that made him who he was, and spent the rest of his life pretending the loss had not changed him. But before he could ever face the man who killed his family, before any of the search would bear fruit, before the long road of revenge had any chance of ending, Rick first had to settle into this borrowed life, a new Beth, a new Jerry, a new Summer, and the grandson he had never met before, the boy who would, without realizing it, become the closest thing to a son Rick would have for the next 40 years. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. That part of the story starts with a love potion, a school dance, and the worst mistake a 14-year-old has ever made on television. Section 2, The Replacement Family, Rick's arrival and the Cronenberg catastrophe. The doorbell rang one night, and a man who looked like a ghost was standing on the porch. That is, as far as the family inside the house could tell what happened. The grandfather they had not seen in 20 years was just there, suddenly, with no warning, no phone call, no letter, no knock to soften the moment. He stood there with his lab coat and his white hair and his flask, and he asked if he could move into the garage. The family inside that house had been told for 2 whole decades that Rick was gone, maybe dead, maybe not. Beth, the woman who answered the door, had grown up without him. She had been a small girl when her father walked out, or rather, when her father had been killed, although she did not know that yet. The Beth on this porch was an adult now. She was a horse surgeon, married to a soft, anxious man named Jerry, raising 2 kids in a house in the suburbs. The kids were Summer and Morty. Summer was 17, sharp, sarcastic, glued to her phone, fighting daily wars with her parents and her brother. Morty was 14, twitchy, nervous, struggling at school, the kind of kid who got picked on a little bit by everyone, including his own family. Neither of them had ever met their grandfather. They had only heard of him as a name, a man who had abandoned their mother long before they were born. Now he was on the porch. Beth let him in. She let him in because she had been waiting her whole life for him to come back, even if she would never have said so out loud. She let him in because the part of her that was still a little girl with a missing father had never quite healed. She let him in because she would always let him in, no matter what he did, no matter how late he was, no matter how much it cost her. That last part was something the show would slowly reveal across many seasons. For now, in that first moment, she just opened the door and welcomed her father home. Jerry, her husband, was less thrilled. This is one of the small details about the start of the show that turns out to be very important later. Rick walking back into Beth's life was a kind of earthquake for the marriage. Beth had always wished her father would come back. Jerry had spent 20 years being the man who stayed, the man who showed up, the man who was there for her when nobody else was. The minute Rick walked through that door, all of that quietly stopped counting. Beth started looking at her dad the way kids look at their dads, and started looking at her husband the way grown-ups look at someone who is in the way. Jerry could feel it. He spent the first few seasons of the show absolutely sure that Rick was trying to break up his marriage, and the truth was, he was not entirely wrong. What none of these people knew, not Beth, not Jerry, not Summer, not Morty, was that the man who had just moved into their garage was not actually their long-lost relative. He looked like him. He sounded like him. He had the same face as the Rick who had walked out 20 years ago. But this Rick had never lived in this house before. He had never tucked Beth in as a little girl. He had never argued with Jerry about anything. He had never carried infant Summer around, never met baby Morty. He had stepped into the empty space their real Rick had left behind, and he had started filling it, and nobody in the family had any reason to suspect a thing. This was the home of the man who had killed his wife and daughter. Rick C137 had tracked Rick Prime back to this dimension and found that Rick Prime was not there. The portal-traveling killer had skipped town long ago, leaving behind the family he had never cared about in the first place. So Rick C137 made a quiet, cold decision. He would move in, he would take the spot, he would wait. If Rick Prime ever came home, and after enough years, even a man like Rick Prime might wander back through the door, Rick would be there to meet him. That was the plan. Move in, wait, hunt. What he did not plan for was the grandson. Morty, that twitchy 14-year-old kid who had been left out of almost every conversation in his own house up until that point, suddenly found himself the chosen partner of a grandfather who needed him for adventures. The pilot episode of the show is, on the surface, a lot of jokes about a drunk old man dragging a kid out of bed at 2 a.m. to fly a flying car through a portal and steal weird seeds from another planet. Underneath that, it is the start of a very specific kind of relationship. A man who has lost everyone he loves, slowly and unwillingly, getting attached to a kid he was supposed to use as cover. The first few episodes follow the pattern of that early dynamic. Rick takes Morty on adventures, Morty gets hurt, scared, traumatized. Rick acts like he does not care. Beth and Jerry argue about whether this is good for the boy. Summer rolls her eyes. The school calls about Morty's grades. Rick fixes the problem by finding a way to pump alien intelligence into Morty for a few hours so he can pass his tests. Snuffles, the family dog, gets accidentally smartened up and tries to take over the world. There is a tiny amusement park inside a homeless man's body. Morty meets a Plumbus factory. The town gets briefly invaded by a singing entity called Bird Person's Friend, and an entity made entirely out of sound. It is, episode after episode, the strangest sitcom on television. A weird grandpa, a weirder grandson.
A family that has no idea what the man in their garage is actually capable of, and no idea how badly things can go wrong when a man like that loses control of his own science. Then, partway through the first season, things go wrong. The episode is called Rick Potion Number 9. The plot starts as a kid problem. Morty has a crush on a girl at school named Jessica. There is a school dance coming up. Morty is scared he will never have a chance with her. He goes to Rick for help. Rick, who has the patience of a man with about 20 other things to do, mixes him up a love potion using a sample of vole DNA. The idea being that voles bond for life. Rick tells Morty to put it on the girl. Morty does. It works. Jessica falls for him. That should be the end of it. It is not. What Rick had forgotten, or, more honestly, what Rick had not bothered to think about, was that flu season was happening. The girl had the flu. The love potion mixed with the flu. The flu spread. The love spread with it. By the next morning, every person on Earth who was not directly related to Morty by blood was uncontrollably in love with him. Willing to kill, willing to die, willing to do anything to be near him. Rick tries to fix it. His first fix, made out of mantis DNA, turns the entire infected population into half-mantis monsters. His second fix, made out of something even worse, mutates the entire human population into hideous, twisted creatures that he offhandedly calls Cronenbergs. The world is now an apocalypse. There is no human civilization left. There are only Cronenberg monsters wandering the wreckage of cities, with Beth and Jerry and Summer barricading themselves in the house, and Rick standing in the driveway looking at the mess he has just made. He realizes in that moment that he cannot fix it. He looks at Morty. He says some version of, "This one is a write-off. We have to bail." And then he does something that the show, up until that point, had only hinted at. He pulls out a portal gun and opens a doorway into a different version of reality. Not just a slightly different one, a specific one. A version of Earth where a different Rick and a different Morty had managed to fix the love potion problem on the first try, but had then died in a freak accident in their garage just minutes later. Their bodies were lying right there. Their family, the Beth and Jerry and Summer of that world, were inside the house, blissfully unaware that their Rick and their Morty were dead in the yard. Rick and Morty climbed through the portal. They walked across the lawn. They picked up the dead bodies of the other Rick and the other Morty, and they buried them in the backyard, in the dirt with shovels, while the family inside the house watched a movie. Then they walked into the house and sat down at the dinner table. The new Beth and the new Jerry never noticed. This is where the show stops being a sitcom about a weird grandpa and starts being a story about what the multiverse actually does to a person. Morty, 14 years old, has just buried his own corpse in the dirt. He has just left behind every friend he has ever had, every room he has ever slept in, every version of his school, his bedroom, his life. The Jessica he wanted to take to the dance is now a Cronenberg monster on a different Earth. The world he was raised on is gone, ruined, forever, because of a love potion he asked for. His grandfather has solved this problem by walking into the next available copy of reality and taking the dead boy's place at the dinner table. There is a scene at the end of that episode that has stayed with viewers for more than 10 years. Morty sits on the steps of the new house, staring at nothing, his eyes empty. He has just learned that everything is replaceable. Every person, every memory, every home. There is always another version. None of it is special. Rick walks past him. Rick says, "Do not think about it." The episode ends. That single moment is the moment Rick and Morty stops being a comedy and starts being something stranger. The jokes are still there. The chases are still there. The talking weirdos and the burping and the alien guns are still there. But the floor has been pulled out from under everything. The family on screen is not the family they started with. The kid Rick is dragging on adventures is now a kid who knows, for the rest of his life, that no version of anyone is the real one. That his grandfather will, if pushed hard enough, throw away an entire reality and step into the next one. The interesting thing is what does not happen after this episode. Beth does not find out. Jerry does not find out. Summer does not find out. The new family carries on with their lives with no idea that the people sitting at their dinner table are not the same Rick and Morty who left for the school dance the day before. The original Rick of this dimension is, as far as anyone outside the garage knows, still missing. The original Morty is, as far as anyone outside the garage knows, still alive. The lie holds. It will hold for a long time. The show will not start tugging on this thread for several seasons, and when it does,
does, the answers will be even harder than the question. For now, the family on screen is the family the show keeps. The audience watches Beth fight with Jerry, Summer skip school, Morty trip over himself, Rick get drunk in the garage. Each week brings another adventure. The Council of Ricks shows up. The Galactic Federation starts paying attention. A wedding gets crashed. A villain in an eye patch makes his first appearance. The story gets bigger and bigger. None of those people, the ones living inside the house, ever quite stop to ask why their Rick came back when he did, or where he had been all those years, or why he sometimes looks at Beth like he is checking to see if she is still really there. Rick has slipped into a stranger's family and is using the cover to live his life. Morty has helped him do it without quite understanding what he was helping with. The original Rick of this dimension is gone, off doing whatever monstrous thing it is that he does. And the family in that house has no idea, none of them, that the man drinking in the garage is the second Rick they have ever had. And the kid eating cereal at the kitchen table is not the boy who was born under that roof. It is a story about a borrowed home. And in any borrowed home, there is always a question hanging in the air about what happens when the real owner comes back, or when other people who look just like the man in the garage start showing up at the door. People who know him, people who have history with him, people who, when they find out he has slipped into a quiet little family in a quiet little dimension to play grandpa, are going to have a lot of very pointed things to say about it. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. That knock on the door comes eventually, and when it does, it brings an entire city in the sky with it. Section 3. The Citadel and Evil Morty's first move. A president in an eye patch. Picture, for a moment, a city floating in space. It is enormous. Bigger than any city that has ever stood on Earth. It hangs in the dark of the cosmos like a glittering ornament. A glass and steel hive lit up from inside by countless windows, all of them glowing in the same shade of green. There are streets and shops and offices. There are restaurants and apartment buildings and classrooms. There are factories that pump out colored smoke into the empty space around them. There are billboards, neon signs, traffic, crowds. And every single person in this city, every face on every street corner, looks like Rick or Morty. Every man with white hair and a lab coat is a Rick. Every nervous teenage boy with a yellow shirt is a Morty. There are millions of them. Some Ricks are tall, some are skinny, some are old, some are young. Some Mortys are confident, some are sad, some have weird hair. Some are drawn slightly differently. There are cowboy Mortys and police Rick. There are factory Mortys, accountant Ricks, fast food Ricks, garbage collector Mortys. The whole city runs on the assumption that the universe makes infinite versions of these two people, and most of those versions, given enough time, end up here. This place is called the Citadel of Ricks. It was built originally by Rick C137 himself, the same Rick who was squatting in Beth and Jerry's garage. He helped design it back when the multiverse was full of grieving Ricks, all hunting the same enemy, all killing each other in their searches, all making a mess of every world they touched. The smartest Ricks eventually agreed that something had to change. They needed a place where they could all live without murdering each other on sight, so they built the Citadel. The Citadel was supposed to be a peace deal, a neutral zone, a spot where every Rick could exist without going to war with himself. In practice, it became something stranger, a whole society, a government, a class system. Some Ricks ran the place from the top, sitting on a council, making rules. Most Ricks did regular jobs, the same kind of dull grind they would have lived through on any normal world, and every Rick had a Morty. The Mortys were treated as accessories, helpers, sidekicks. The Citadel even had a Morty market, where Mortys could be bought, traded, returned, replaced. Some Mortys lived in apartments with their Ricks. Some lived in pens. Some were used as servants. Some worked in schools designed only for Mortys, taught how to be agreeable, how to forgive, how to stay loyal to the Rick they were assigned to. The reason for this was an open secret in the Citadel, but the show takes a while to spell it out plainly. Mortys are useful to Ricks because their brainwaves cancel out a Rick's brainwaves. The smartest man in any universe gives off a kind of mental signal that any other smart enemy can spot from a long way off. A Morty next to a Rick acts like a quiet blanket over that signal. A Rick with a Morty is invisible. A Rick without a Morty is a target. So every Rick has a Morty. And the Mortys are bred, raised, and shaped to be good at being Mortys, which mostly means being a little dumb, a little anxious, and very easy to push around. This is the world Rick and Morty walk into the first time the show really opens up the multiverse in front of the audience. The episode is called Close Rick Counters of the Rick Kind. It airs late in the first season. Up until that point, the show has hinted at the idea that there are other Ricks out there, but it has never actually shown a whole society variety of them. This episode opens with a knock on the door of the family home. Several Ricks step into the living room. They are members of the council. They have come to arrest Rick C137 for the murders of dozens of other Ricks across the multiverse. Rick denies it. The council does not believe him. They drag him away with Morty in tow to face trial in the Citadel. What follows is a chase. Rick and Morty escape on the run inside a city full of versions of themselves. They duck into apartments owned by other Ricks. They get help from a Morty resistance, a small group of Mortys who have figured out how to think for themselves and want the system to fall. They piece together that someone is, in fact, killing Ricks and framing the show's Rick for it. Someone has been kidnapping Mortys, holding them in a hidden compound, scanning their brains for some unknown reason. The killer turns out to be a Rick wearing a heavy beard and a creepy stare, holed up in a private dimension with a basement full of captive Mortys. Rick and Morty break in. They free the Mortys. They corner the killer. The killer is shot dead. Justice, the show seems to suggest, has been done. But the episode has one more twist hidden in its final minutes. While the freed Mortys are being celebrated, while the heroes are being congratulated, while the camera is pointed somewhere else, a single small Morty stands quietly off to one side. This Morty is wearing an eye patch. He has been standing there the whole time, not saying anything, watching everything. The other Mortys cheer. He does not. The crowd disperses. He slips into it. The camera lingers on him for one moment longer than feels normal. Then he is gone. That is the audience's first look at the character who will, eventually, become the most important villain the show ever produces. He is given no name. He has no lines. He just stands there in the back of a crowd, in his eye patch, with the look of a person who has just seen something work exactly the way he wanted it to work. It is a small moment, easy to miss on a first watch. Many viewers did miss it, but the show is patient. The show is willing to wait. The show is willing to let a tiny detail in the back corner of one shot turn out, 3 seasons later, to be the thread that the entire Citadel hangs on. The truth, slowly revealed across later seasons, is that the bearded killer Rick was not in charge of his own kidnapping operation. The Morty in the eye patch was. The eye patch itself was a device, hidden in plain sight, that let a smart Morty quietly control a Rick from underneath. The bearded Rick was a puppet. The Morty was the hand inside it. He had been killing Ricks the whole time. He had been scanning Morty brains the whole time. And nobody, not the council, not the bearded Rick himself, not Rick C137, had figured it out until it was already too late. That Morty would, in the years that followed, be given a nickname by the audience, and eventually by the show itself, Evil Morty. He goes underground for a long stretch of episodes after his first appearance. The show goes back to other adventures. The audience does not forget him, but the show pretends to. Then, in the 3rd season, an episode called The Ricklantis Mix-Up brings him back, in a way that almost no one sees coming. The episode opens with the show's Rick and Morty on the way to an underwater city, complete with scuba gear and a fun premise. The audience settles in for a one-off ocean adventure. Then, for the rest of the episode, the show abandons those two characters entirely. The whole episode takes place inside the Citadel. Different stories, different Ricks, different Mortys, a school, a factory making sweet wafers out of the suffering of one specific Rick, a team of corrupt cops, one Rick and one Morty, working a beat in a Morty slum, a small Morty, an underdog, running for president of the Citadel. That last storyline turns out to be the heart of the episode. The Morty running for president is presented as a hopeful figure. He gives speeches about fairness, about a better future for Mortys, about ending the cruel system that traps every Morty in the role of a sidekick. He wins the election. He becomes the first Morty ever elected to lead the Citadel. Then, in the final minutes of the episode, he walks into a private room and meets with the council members who actually run the place. They warn him. They threaten him. They explain that the office of president is mostly for show, and that the real power belongs to them. They tell him to go play with his speeches and leave the actual running of the Citadel to the adults. He smiles. He nods. He kills them. All of them. Right there in the room. And as he stands over their bodies, the camera moves closer to his face, and the audience sees, for the first time in years, that this is the same Morty in the same eye patch from the back of that crowd in season 1. He has not stopped working. He has not gone away. He has not given up. He has simply spent years moving from one position to the next, climbing the ladder, getting closer and closer to the top of a system he intended to take over from the start. The closing minutes of that episode play out over a piece of music that, by now, has become tied to him in the audience's mind. A slow, sad, beautiful song called For the Damaged Coda. It plays over images of him taking his seat at the head of the council. It plays over images of his eye twitching. soothing. It plays over the soft, terrible understanding that this is not a man in the eye patch. This is a child, a boy who has spent his whole life under the thumb of a Rick, a boy who got tired of it, a boy who is patient enough and angry enough and smart enough to spend years dismantling the entire system from the inside. It is one of the most quietly chilling endings the show has ever put together. The episode is widely regarded by fans as one of the best the series has ever produced, and the song over the credits is the reason it sticks with people for years. Evil Morty, by the end of that episode, is in charge of the Citadel. The Council of Ricks is dead. The Mortys are still bred, still traded, still kept in their boxes. The factories still hum. The bills still get passed. The system carries on under new management. An evil Morty, sitting at the head of the table with a glass of whiskey in his hand, has plans that none of the other Mortys in the Citadel can yet imagine. Most of those plans involve a wall, a specific wall, a wall the Citadel has been quietly maintaining for as long as it has existed. A wall that does not divide one country from another or one neighborhood from another, but one whole stretch of reality from another. A wall that explains, in one quiet sentence, why every Rick in the Citadel is the smartest man in his world. Every single one of them, with no exceptions. In a multiverse that contains every possible version of every possible person, the Citadel does not run on luck. It runs on a hidden barrier that locks every Rick inside a curated slice of the multiverse, where the only versions of reality they can ever travel to are the ones where Rick is, by design, on top. Evil Morty, sitting on his new throne, intends to break that wall.
Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously.
But before you can break it, before any of the next chapter of the multiverse can come into focus, Rick C137 has to be dragged through a far worse fall first. The Citadel he helped build will turn its back on him. The Galactic Federation will come knocking. A wedding will become a trap. And for the first and only time in the entire run of the show so far, Rick will find himself in handcuffs, in a prison, with a machine plugged into his head, while a stranger in a uniform sifts through every memory he has ever had. Section 4. The Galactic Federation and the Rick Shank. Rick-demption. Rick at his most powerful. The wedding was supposed to be a happy thing. Bird Person, Rick's oldest friend in the universe, had finally found someone he wanted to marry, a young woman named Tammy. She was a friend of Summer's from school. The two of them had met during an earlier adventure, struck up an unlikely romance, and somehow ended up engaged. The wedding was being held on a planet far from Earth, in a beautiful outdoor setting, with a guest list that included every weird, wonderful, dangerous friend Rick had ever made across decades of multiversal trouble. Rick was not in a great place going into the day. The whole family was at a low point, honestly. Beth and Jerry had been falling apart for half a season. The kids were caught in the middle of it. Rick had spent the back half of the second season being a little quieter, a little more bitter, a little more aware of how alone he was in his own life. The rest of the family had decided to leave Earth and live for a while in a strange, floating planet of cookies and candy that Rick had set up as a hideout. Things were not going well. The marriage was crumbling. The kids were lost. Rick was drinking more than usual. The wedding was, in theory, a chance to get away, to celebrate something, to watch a friend find some happiness for once. It was a trap. Tammy, the bride, was not who anyone thought she was. She was an undercover agent for the Galactic Federation. The wedding was an ambush. The moment Rick stepped into that beautiful outdoor space, surrounded by his old friends and his family, dozens of Federation soldiers came pouring in from every side. Squanchy, another old friend of Rick's, was killed on the spot. Bird Person was shot dead at the altar by his own bride. Bullets were flying. The crowd scattered. Rick's family was cornered, and Rick, who could have run, who could have portaled out, who could have left the family to deal with the mess on their own, did something the show had not yet shown him do. He surrendered. He stepped forward, hands up, and let the Galactic Federation take him into custody, on the condition that they let his family go. He went quietly. He let them put cuffs on him. He let them load him into a transport. He let himself be carried off into the heart of the largest, most powerful government in the known universe, knowing he would probably never come out the other side. The reason he did this is one of the most important quiet truths of the show. Rick had spent his entire life telling himself that he did not care about anything. He had built his whole personality on the idea that nothing mattered, that family was a chain, that emotional attachment was for losers, that any version of any person was replaceable. And then, when his family was in real, lethal danger, he turned himself in to save them. The show does not make a big speech about it. He does not announce his feelings. He does not explain himself. He just walks forward, hands up, and gets into the truck. That single moment is the thing he has spent decades pretending he is not. A man who would die for the people he loves. The episode ends with Rick in a tiny prison cell, the door slamming shut behind him, the screen going black. The audience is left to sit with that image for an entire summer. The show goes on its longest break to date. Fans wait for over a year and a half. Nobody knows when or if the show will come back. Then, Then, on the first day of April in 2017, with absolutely no warning, the third season premiere airs in the middle of the night. The episode is called The Rick Shank Rickdemption. Adult Swim does not announce it. They do not advertise it. They simply start playing it on a loop over and over again for hours in the middle of the night with no commercials and no explanation. Fans wake up the next morning to find that the show is back, that an entire new episode has just been dumped onto television, and that whatever they thought was going to happen next had already happened while they were asleep. The episode opens inside Rick's head, literally inside it. The Galactic Federation has plugged a machine into his brain. They are not torturing him with pain. They are doing something stranger. They are walking through his memories. A young Federation officer, a Gormflamite named Cornelius Daniel, is standing inside a recreation of Rick's childhood home, looking around at the dusty furniture, leafing through a photo album, hunting for the one specific thing the Federation wants from Rick more than anything else in the universe: the recipe for portal travel. The Federation has known for years that Rick can travel between worlds. They have never been able to figure out how. They want the technology. They want it badly enough that they have devoted the entire might of a galaxy-wide government to the project of cracking Rick's brain open and copying the formula out of it. Daniel is their best mind walker. The plan is simple. Find the memory of the moment Rick invented the portal gun. Watch him do it. Steal the math. The middle of the episode is a strange, dreamlike sequence in which Daniel is led through the early life of Rick Sanchez. The show presents it as if it might be a real memory. Rick as a young man, a wife named Diane, a small daughter named Beth, a bomb dropping through a portal into the garage, a grieving Rick standing alone in the rubble, sketching out the math for the portal gun in chalk on the floor, finishing his life's work in a single, feverish night, then turning the gun toward a portal-traveling other version of himself who shows up to gloat. Young Rick uses the gun to fight back. Young Rick swears revenge. Young Rick is born in pain. It is a beautiful, sad, painful sequence. It looks, in every way, like a real backstory. Daniel watches it happen with growing satisfaction, sure that he is finally getting the answer he came for. Then, just as the math is about to be revealed on the screen, Rick lets out a small, smug laugh inside the memory. He turns to Daniel. He explains casually that everything Daniel has just been watching is fake, a totally fabricated origin story. The math on the chalkboard is not the formula for portal travel. It is a virus. Daniel has just downloaded it straight into the Federation's server, the same server that runs every prison, every transport, every soldier in the galaxy. Rick uses the virus to swap his mind into Daniel's body. He gets up. He walks out of the prison wearing the body of a Federation officer, while the real Daniel is left trapped in the unconscious shell of Rick's old, broken body. What happens next is, by some distance, the most powerful Rick is ever shown to be in the entire run of the show. He uses the same virus to crash the Federation's economy. The whole galactic government runs on a single shared currency. Rick rewrites the value of that currency overnight, dropping it to zero. The Federation, in the space of a single afternoon, goes bankrupt. Soldiers stop getting paid. Transports stop running. The grip of the largest, most powerful empire in the known universe simply lets go of every planet it had been holding down, including Earth. The Federation pulls out. Earth is free again. While that is happening, Rick has been busy on other fronts. The Council of Ricks, the same group that arrested him in Season 1, has decided that Rick C137 has become too much of a problem to ignore. They send a team of assassins after him. He turns the tables. He hacks into their portal system. He pulls every assassin Rick that has been chasing him into a single room, where he kills them all in a few seconds. Then he travels to the Citadel. He walks into the council chamber. He brings the entire building down on top of itself. He blows the Council of Ricks completely apart, kills every member sitting at the table, and walks out of the rubble without a scratch. In a single afternoon, in a single episode, Rick has destroyed the Galactic Federation, freed Earth, and wiped out the leadership of the Citadel. He goes home. He walks back into the kitchen at Beth and Jerry's house. The family is sitting around the table. Beth and Jerry have, by this point, separated. Jerry has moved out. The kids are confused, hurting, somewhere in between angry and sad. Rick sits down at the table and gives one of the strangest speeches the show has ever written. It is a speech to Morty, mostly, but it is really meant for the audience. He talks about how he came to this dimension specifically because he wanted to be in charge. He talks about how getting Jerry kicked out of the house was, in his own quiet way, the goal he had been working toward for a long time. He says
he is the patriarch of the family now. He says nothing is going to change that. He talks about a fast food sauce called Szechuan sauce that McDonald's used to sell as a promotion for a movie back in the late 90s. He says he wants to find it again. He says his entire driving force, his whole reason for going on, is that one specific dipping sauce. He calls it a series-long arc. The speech is a joke, partly. Rick is being absurd on purpose, but underneath the joke is a much darker idea. He has put his family exactly where he wants them. He has removed Jerry from the house. He has put Beth in a position where she has to lean on him. He has positioned himself as the most important person in every life under that roof. He has set up a board he can run forever. And his stated reason for living is a dipping sauce, because the alternative, admitting that he might actually love these people, or that he might actually need them, or that he might be terrified of losing them the way he lost Diane, is a thing he cannot say out loud. That episode ends with Rick at the dinner table, surrounded by the family he has just secretly seized control of, while Morty looks at him, troubled, beginning to notice for the first time that something about his grandfather is not quite as harmless as he had assumed. The third season that follows is the show at its most confident. The episodes are sharp, the jokes are tight. Rick is at the top of his game. He fights pirates, plays heists, raises a tiny civilization inside his own car battery, gets into and out of dozens of impossible jams. He is, in every visible way, a god in his own story. Nothing can touch him. The Federation is gone. The Council is gone. Jerry is gone. The board is set the way he wants it. And yet, slowly, across the back half of the season, the family starts to drift away from him. Beth begins to crack under the weight of being his daughter. Summer hardens into a person who is starting to question whether her grandfather is actually a hero. Morty grows more disillusioned by the week. Even Jerry, exiled in a sad apartment, eventually finds a way back into the family, and Beth quietly chooses him over Rick at the end of the season, sitting on the porch and remarrying her ex-husband, while Rick stands outside, drunk, watching from the lawn. The third season ends with Rick on top of the world, and somehow, at the same time, more alone than he has been in years. He had taken down 2 governments. He had cleared every threat in his life. He had bent his family into the exact shape he wanted them in. And in the doing of all of it, he had made himself smaller in the eyes of the people he had done it for. They had started to see him. That seeing would only get worse over the next 2 seasons. The cracks would keep spreading. The family would keep pulling away. The show would keep tightening the screws on him in episode after episode, until eventually, a single quiet revelation, dropped into a season finale, would change everything the audience thought they knew about why Rick is the smartest man in any room he has ever walked into. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. The reason was hiding inside the Citadel the whole time, and the only Morty smart enough to find it was the same little boy in the eye patch who had been waiting, very patiently, for his moment. Section 5. Rick, Mirai, Jack, and the Central Finite Curve, the cage around the multiverse. 2 whole seasons go by between the destruction of the Federation and the moment everything quietly comes apart. Season 4 is light on its feet. The episodes feel like one-offs, with very little of the larger story being pushed forward. Rick gets attached to a dragon, Morty steals a crystal that lets him see his own death, a heist movie plays out in space, a toilet on a hidden planet becomes the site of a murder mystery. The family throws Thanksgiving with a president who looks suspiciously like a real one. The whole season ends with the return of a second Beth from outer space, and the discovery that Rick himself does not know which Beth in his life is the real one, and which Beth is a clone he made and then, on purpose, lost track of. Season 5 keeps going the same way for most of its run. Rick fights an old enemy named Mr. Nimbus. Beth and Space Beth start a romance with each other. The family meets the night versions of themselves, who live in their bodies while they sleep. There's an episode in a cave full of goo. There's an episode about superheroes. There's an episode about a giant incest baby. Episode after episode, the show feels confident, weird, funny, a little wandering. The bigger questions are mostly left alone. Then the season finale arrives. It is called Rick, Mirai, Jack. It airs in 2 parts, and it is, by some distance, the most important hour of television the show has ever produced. The episode opens with Rick and Morty driving in the space cruiser, joking around. Then a portal opens behind them. Eye Patch Morty steps out. It has been years in Showtime since the audience has seen him. He vanished into the crowd at the end of season 1. He reappeared as the new president of the Citadel at the end of season 3. Since then, the show has held him back, hinted at him, dropped a face here, a name there. He has been sitting in his Citadel office, somewhere off screen, doing whatever he has been doing. The audience has been waiting for him to come back to the front of the story. He comes back here with a knife. The opening of the finale is a sharp, fast chase. Eye Patch Morty is hunting down Rick C137,
C137. He shoots up the space cruiser. He drags the two of them through portals, dimensions, traps, decoys. The whole opening is a furious set piece. Rick is bleeding. Morty is screaming. Eye Patch Morty is calm, smiling, in complete control. He is leading them somewhere on purpose. He has them exactly where he wants them. He gets them to the Citadel. A new Citadel. The one he has been quietly running since the end of Season 3. A renovated, polished, completely controlled version of the old hive. The streets are still full of Ricks and Mortys, but the whole feel of the place has changed. Eye Patch Morty has been president for years now. He has tightened his grip on every part of the city. He has remade it in his image. He sits Rick and Morty down at a long dinner table. He pours them wine. He asks them to relax. He explains, very politely, that he has been waiting for this evening for a long time. He has questions. Rick is going to answer them. Rick, who has spent the entire show being the smartest man in every room, sits there with no power, with no cards left to play, with the man in the eye patch holding a fork across the table. The roles are reversed. The grandfather is the prisoner. The boy is the host. The host begins to talk. What follows is a long, careful, devastating speech. Eye Patch Morty walks the show's Morty through everything. He explains who he is. He explains what the Citadel actually is. He explains what every Rick has been doing, quietly, behind every Morty's back, since the day the place was built. The Citadel, he says, is not just a city. It is a system. The Mortys living inside it are not partners or sidekicks or grandsons. They are tools. They are bred. They are sold. They are traded. They are taught from an early age to forgive their Ricks no matter what those Ricks do. Because forgiveness is the leash that keeps a Morty loyal. He shows the show's Morty the factories where Mortys are made on demand, the schools where they are programmed to be agreeable, the markets where they are passed around like cheap goods. This is the first big shock of the episode. The Mortys, all of them, including the show's Morty himself, are part of a kind of farm. A gentle farm on the surface, a horrible one underneath. Then comes the second shock, the bigger one. Eye Patch Morty explains, slowly, why it is that every Rick anywhere in the multiverse seems to be the smartest person in his world. The audience has been told for years that this is just a fact. Ricks are the smartest. That is who they are. It is true in every dimension, in every reality, on every world the show has ever shown. It is true, he says, because the Ricks rigged it.
A long time ago, when the Citadel was first being built, the founding Ricks set up something hidden, a barrier, an invisible wall that runs through the entire multiverse. The wall does not divide one country from another, or one planet from another, or even one solar system from another. The wall divides one set of realities from another. It cuts the whole multiverse into two halves. On one side are all the worlds where Rick is the smartest being alive. On the other side are all the worlds where he is not. Worlds where some other person, somewhere, is smarter than him. The wall locks the Ricks inside the first half. Their portal guns can only travel within that half. Their ships can only fly within that half. The whole infinite stretch of reality that they call the multiverse is, in fact, only a curated section of the real multiverse, a walled-off chunk, a neighborhood inside a much bigger city, with the gate locked from the inside, and every Rick keeping the key. This wall has a name, the Central Finite Curve. Eye Patch Morty says it out loud, almost gently, while the show's Morty stares at him, slowly understanding. Every Rick the audience has ever met has been the smartest man in the room, because he set up the rules so that no smarter person could ever walk into the room. Every adventure, every fight, every scheme, every weird genius moment Rick has ever had on screen, all of it has been happening inside a cage that the Ricks built themselves, full of versions of reality that were specifically chosen to make Rick feel like a god. He uses one short, sharp phrase to describe what the Ricks have been doing for all this time. He calls it an infinite crib built around an infinite baby. The baby is Rick. The crib is the whole walled-off section of reality. The Mortys are the little stuffed toys placed inside the crib so the baby can feel safe. The show's Morty sits there with no idea what to do with any of this information. While Eye Patch Morty is talking, his real plan is moving forward in the background. He has spent years building a single, specific machine inside the Citadel called a dimensional drive. The point of the machine is to crack the wall, to punch a hole in the central finite curve, to open a single door from the small, walled-off neighborhood of Rick reality into the much bigger, much stranger world that lies outside it. He has the machine almost ready. He just needs one last piece of information to finish it. That information is locked inside Rick C137's head. That is why he brought Rick to the Citadel. That is why he sat him down at the table. That is why he poured the wine. The whole evening has been a long, polite way of getting Rick close enough to the drive to scan his brain. Halfway through the dinner, the scan finishes. Eye Patch Morty smiles. He apologizes for ruining the meal. He stands up, he walks out. He fires
up the drive. The Citadel begins to shake. Green light begins to pour out of every crack in the city. Down in the lower levels, every Rick and every Morty trapped inside the system starts to realize that something terrible is happening. What is happening is a massacre. The drive needs power. Eyepatch Morty has rigged it to draw that power from the bodies of every Rick and every Morty in the Citadel. The portal fluid that runs through the city's veins gets rerouted into giant grinders. Every Rick who tries to escape, every Morty who runs for an exit, every citizen of the place is funneled, against their will, into these meat-pulping machines and turned into fuel for the engine that is about to break the curve. It is one of the most brutal sequences the show has ever animated. The Citadel of Ricks, the place that took years to build, the place that has been a whole world unto itself across multiple seasons, is killed in the space of a single scene. Tens of thousands of Ricks and Mortys die. The streets burn. The towers fall. The factories collapse. By the end of the sequence, the Citadel is a smoking ruin floating in the dark. While that is happening, the show's Rick is dragging the show's Morty through the chaos, trying to get them out alive. They reach the outer edge of the city. The drive has done its work. A single door has been punched through the wall, a door from the inside of the curve to the outside. Eyepatch Morty walks toward it. The show's Morty calls out to him. He asks him, plainly, why he has done all of this. Why the killing? Why the Citadel? Why the Eyepatch? Why any of it? Eyepatch Morty turns to him. He gives a simple answer. He says he is tired of Rick. Not this Rick specifically. Every Rick. The whole idea of Rick. The whole system that Rick has built around himself for centuries. In every world, with every version of his grandson trapped inside it. Eyepatch Morty has spent his entire life inside that system. He has watched what it does to Mortys. He has watched what it does to himself. He has decided he wants out. Not just out of the Citadel, out of Rick. Out of the whole walled-off slice of reality where Rick is the smartest man anywhere. He wants to step into the real multiverse. The one that was always out there. The one full of beings smarter and stranger than any Rick will ever be. He says, almost kindly, that any Morty who is sick of his Rick is, by the Citadel's definition, an evil Morty. So fine, he is evil. He accepts the label. And then he steps through the door. He is gone. The curve is still there, mostly. The hole he punched in it stays open behind him for a moment, like a wound, then begins to close. The show's Rick and Morty are left standing in the wreckage of the Citadel. Rick has nothing. His friends from the Citadel are dead. His political board is gone. The wall he built to keep himself on top is cracked. The little boy in the eye patch has just walked into the part of the multiverse where there are people smarter than Rick. The first time in the entire history of the show that the smartest man in any room is no longer in the room at all. Rick does not say much for the rest of the episode. He just looks tired. The show ends quietly, with the two of them stepping into a portal and going home. It is the most lore-heavy hour of television the show has ever made. The audience walks out of it with, for the first time, a clear picture of what Rick has actually been doing for all these decades. The wife, the daughter, the bomb, the portal gun, the killing, the Citadel, the curve, the walled-off neighborhood of reality, the little boy in the eye patch growing up inside the cage. The whole picture, all of it, finally, in one place. After Rick Mirai Jack, the show is a different show. The cage is broken. The villain is loose in the bigger world. The thing Rick spent 40 years pretending was infinite turns out to have walls. He has, in some real way, lost the only game he was ever really winning. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. Which is part of why, when he finally comes face to face with the man who killed Diane in the season that follows, the moment does not land the way he has spent his whole life expecting it to land. The thing he has been chasing since the very beginning of the story is finally about to be in the same room as him. And Rick is going to find out, in the most painful way possible, that catching the thing you have been chasing does not always fix the hole the chase was hiding. Section 6. Unmortrican to Hot Rick. The death of Rick Prime and the letting go of Diane. The 6th season opens the morning after the Citadel falls. Rick and Morty are home. Beth is making breakfast. Jerry is doing whatever Jerry does. The kids are at the table. The world around them carries on, slow and small, like nothing happened. The show, which has just finished blowing up the most important location in its own mythology, simply moves on. There is a brief, almost casual mention of the fact that the Citadel is gone. The family asks one or two questions. Rick deflects. Life keeps going. Underneath that calm surface, though, a small change has begun to grow. Rick is no longer untouchable. The wall he hid behind for decades has a hole in it. The little boy in the eye patch is loose somewhere out there in the bigger reality, holding a card Rick cannot match. The Citadel is rubble. The Council is dead. Rick has, for the first time, no system left to hide inside. He is a man in a borrowed garage in a borrowed dimension, with a flask, a portal gun, and a grudge that has been sitting inside his chest for 40 years. The grudge has a name now. The audience finally hears it spoken plainly. Rick Prime. The name lands in Season 6. Up until that point, the killer of Diane and Beth has been called by other things. Weird Rick, the original portal traveler, the other him. In Season 6, the show begins calling him Rick Prime out loud, partly because of a neat side effect of an episode called Solar Ricks, where Rick tries to reset everyone in the family to their original dimensions. The reset accidentally sends Rick Prime back to the home he abandoned long ago. For a few brief minutes, Rick C137 and Rick Prime are in the same general slice of reality again. They almost meet. They miss each other by a hair. Rick Prime laughs at him from a hologram, taunts him, then disappears into the multiverse again, leaving traps and decoys behind to slow the chase. The hunt is on, properly this time. The thing Rick has been pretending he was over is back at the front of his life. He spends late nights in the basement of the family home, fiddling with stolen tech, building scanners, decoding the trail Rick Prime has left behind. Morty notices. The family notices. Rick is quieter than usual. He drinks a little more. He laughs a little less. The 40-year-old wound is open again, and everyone in the house can feel it leaking. Then comes Season 7, and an episode called Unmortrican. The episode opens with what looks like a standard adventure. Rick and Morty are out doing something silly and violent. Morty gets pushed too far. He snaps. He builds a small device, hides it under a black eye patch, slaps it onto his own head, and reaches across the table to scalp the Rick he has been forced to live with. The eye patch sinks itself into the back of his head. The Rick on the receiving end goes glassy-eyed. The Morty stands up, smiles, and walks out. The audience realizes, in a small jolt, that the show has just paused the main story to give the origin of Eye Patch Morty in flashback. A regular kid, a regular Rick, one bad day, one quiet decision. That is how the most dangerous Morty in the multiverse is born. He is not from a special dimension. He is not a chosen one. He is just a Morty who got fed up and built a way out of the cage he was living in. The flashback ends. The show returns to the present. Rick C137 has, by now, narrowed the hunt for Rick Prime down to a series of decoys. Rick Prime has scattered fakes of himself all over the multiverse, all of them carrying the same face, the same lab coat, the same cold smile. Rick C137 has been tracking each one down, killing each one, eliminating them one at a time from the list, hoping that when he reaches the last one will be the real thing. A trap closes around him. He gets pulled into a kind of arena, a prison set up by Rick Prime to handle the problem of all the angry Ricks who have come hunting for him over the years. Rick Prime built the arena ages ago. The walls are designed to hold dozens of grieving Ricks at once and force them to fight each other to the death. The promise is that the last Rick standing will get his Diane back. The promise is a lie. The arena is a meat grinder. Every Rick that ever entered it died there. Rick C137 ends up in the arena, with Morty next to him. He is also, to his complete surprise, joined by Eye Patch Morty. The little boy who blew up the Citadel has come back into the story. Not for revenge, not for some scheme. He is in the arena because Rick Prime's traps had caught him too. He has been quietly living somewhere outside the curve, away from the show's Rick, doing his own thing, until Rick C137's hunt for Rick Prime started disturbing his peace. So he has come, reluctantly, to help finish the job. Two Mortys, both terrified of each other, both forced to work together. One Rick, with his nemesis finally somewhere within reach. The arena begins to dump Rick after Rick into the fight. Rick C137 burns through them. The killer robot at the end of the round wears Diane's face. Rick beats it apart anyway. The trap fails. The trio escapes. They use the data they pulled out of the trap to track Rick Prime down at last. The fight that follows is short and ugly. Rick Prime is good. He is fast. He is prepared for this. He has body doubles he can swap into. He has a building full of tech designed to kill any version of himself that walks through the door. For a long moment, it looks like Rick Prime is going to win. He has Rick C137 on the ground. He is mocking him. He is preparing the killing blow. Then, Eye Patch Morty steps in. He uses the chaos to disable Rick Prime's regenerating ability, shut down his body doubles, and pin him in place. He scans Rick Prime's mind for the schematics of a weapon Rick Prime built years ago. The same weapon that was used to erase every Diane from every reality. The audience finally hears its name. Some Ricks call it the Omega device. Rick Prime, in his usual style, claims it is too cool to have a name. Eye Patch Morty downloads the plans. Then he steps back. He looks at Rick C137. He gives him a small, almost gentle gesture. He hands the kill over. The episode does something here that it has almost never done before. It removes the music. It removes the comedy. It removes the cuts.
It just lets the camera sit on Rick C137 as he walks up to the man who killed his wife and daughter and starts hitting him. He hits him with his fists, not with a gun, not with a weapon, with his hands, over and over again. The blows are slow and heavy. Rick Prime, defiant to the very end, mocks him through the whole thing. He tells Rick that the two of them are the same. He tells Rick that he gave Rick the life he was always meant to have. He tells Rick that the only difference between them is that Rick Prime got there first. He laughs through broken teeth. The laughing only stops when the body finally stops moving. By the end, Rick Prime is dead. Rick C137 is covered in blood. Eye Patch Morty has destroyed the weapon and slipped away with the only copy of its plans, telling Rick to leave him alone forever or face the consequences. The episode ends with Rick C137 sitting at the family dinner table, staring at nothing, while a quiet song plays over the credits, Mazzy Star. Look on down from the bridge. The song says, in soft and broken language, that everybody seems so far away, and everybody just wants to be free. The lyrics are not about Rick. They might as well be. He has done it. He has caught the thing he has been chasing for 40 years. The man who killed Diane is dead. The mission is over. The wound that has been bleeding inside him since the day a portal opened in his garage is, in some technical sense, finally closed. He feels nothing. That is the heart of the rest of the show. All the way through Season 7 and into Season 8. Rick C137 has spent his entire adult life telling himself that one specific moment of revenge would fix him. That if he could just get his hands on Rick Prime, the hole in his chest would seal up and he would be able to live like a normal person again. He gets his hands on Rick Prime. The hole stays exactly where it is. Nothing fills it. Nothing closes. The mission was never really the cure. The seasons that follow are quieter than anything the show has done before. The episodes are weirder, gentler, more focused on the family. Rick spends time with Beth. He spends time with Jerry. He goes on softer adventures. He starts seeing a tough alien woman named Bug Ann, an old comrade from his rebellion days, and the relationship grows over the course of Season 8 in small, careful steps. The show, almost tenderly, walks Rick through the work of trying to live as a person who is no longer hunting anyone. Then the Season 8 finale arrives. The episode is called Hot Rick. It airs on the 27th of July in the year 2025. It is the most recent canonical episode of the show as of this telling. The plot, on its surface, is small. Bug Ann has invited Rick to a family event. He is hesitant. She tells him, plainly, that he has not yet moved on from Diane. She also tells him something the show has been hinting at for 2 seasons. The Omega device, the weapon Rick Prime built and used to wipe Diane from every reality, did more than just erase her. It also damaged the memories of the people who loved her. Rick himself can no longer fully picture his wife. Beth can barely hold on to the mother who raised her. Both of them are walking around with photo albums that are slowly going blank. Back home, Rick discovers that Jerry, of all people, has been having strange new memories. Memories of Rick being a loving, supportive father figure. Memories that never happened. Rick reaches into Jerry's mind and finds the source of the problem. A small, sentient version of himself, called Memory Rick, has been hiding inside Jerry's head for years. Memory Rick is the version of Rick that exists only in old, half-faded family memories. He is kinder. He is gentler. He is more loving. He is everything the real Rick has not been able to be. Rick extracts him. He puts him in a tiny digital box. He tries to reset Jerry's mind. The box is not enough. Memory Rick wants more. He has been trying all this time to protect the last surviving memory of Diane. He worms his way into Beth's head next and starts shaping Beth's memories of her childhood, trying to use Beth as a vessel to keep the memory of Diane alive. Beth's mind, under that pressure, begins to break. By the climax of the episode, she is sitting on the floor of the basement with a gun pressed against her own head, convinced, in a sentient memory's logic, that the only way to save the family is to die for it. Rick, for the first time in the show, does not solve the problem with a gadget or a trick or a clever line. He sits down next to his daughter. He talks to her. He tells her, plainly, that memories are not the same thing as the people they belong to. He tells her that her real mother loved her so completely that she would never have agreed to hijack Beth's mind to keep herself alive. He tells her, in the simplest words the show has ever given him, that it is okay to let go. Beth puts the gun down. Rick goes back into his own mind, into the deepest, most locked up corner of it, and finds the very last memory of Diane he has been keeping safe all these years. He removes it. He pulls it out of his head completely, the way one might lift a fragile photograph out of a frame. He does not destroy it. He does something stranger. He gives Memory Rick and a memory version of Diane a small, private space to live together. A digital pocket of reality, far from
anyone. The two of them get the quiet, loving life that Rick himself never got to have. Rick says goodbye to her, the version of her that exists only in his head, and lets the pod drift away. Then he goes to bug Ann's family event. He makes a real, present effort. He fails badly because he is still Rick, but he is trying. The final scene is the family back at the dinner table. Beth is quiet, still holding the weight of what she almost did. Rick, beside her, is finally something close to a father. Outside the kitchen window, the universe carries on, much bigger now that the wall has cracked, much stranger now that Rick Prime is dead, much harder now that no one is chasing anything. The episode ends. The season ends. The story so far ends. There is, however, one last little thing the show does in the credits. A short scene with a familiar face. A small alien who has been popping up in season finales for years, breaking the fourth wall, talking softly to the audience, summing up the show. He talks about his favorite episode of the season. He smiles at the camera. He waves goodbye. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. And while he is doing it, the camera quietly pulls back and reveals that he is being watched on a screen in a sterile lab by people in white coats who are very, very interested in what is wrong with him. Section 7. Our Morty isn't C137's original Morty. Now the story shifts a little. For the rest of the way through, the lights come down on what is true and come up on what might be true. The events that are about to be talked through have not been laid out plainly by the show. They are the kinds of ideas fans have been chewing on for years, in quiet corners of the internet, late at night, the way people chew on small, loose questions before sleep. None of it is officially confirmed. All of it has, at the very least, a few real fingerprints on it. The first of these soft, half-true ideas is one of the oldest. It has been around almost as long as the show itself. The idea is simple. The Morty everyone watches every week, the nervous 14-year-old in the yellow shirt, the boy who eats cereal in the kitchen and stutters through his crushes and gets dragged on adventures whether he wants to be there or not, may not be the original Morty of his dimension. The Morty Rick first knocked on the door for, the kid Rick was supposed to be the grandfather of, may have been a different Morty altogether. A Morty who is not in the house anymore. A Morty who was, somewhere along the way, quietly replaced. To see why fans first started thinking this, you have to go back to a very small detail in Season 2. There is an episode in which Rick takes Morty to the home of his old friend Bird Person. Bird Person lives in a small house on a quiet alien world, alone with his memories. While Rick and Morty are inside, the camera takes a small, almost careless look around the walls. There are framed photos hanging up, old pictures. Memories from Rick's earlier days. Most of them are of Rick with his friends. Rick with Squanchy, Rick with Bird Person, Rick at a bar, Rick laughing with people the show has not yet introduced. And in one of those pictures, very clearly, is a younger Rick holding a baby Morty. That single picture, sitting innocently on a wall in the background of a normal scene, is the first crack in the simple version of the story. The show has told the audience again and again that Rick was missing from Beth's family for 20 whole years before he showed up at the door. Beth, his daughter, has said this. Jerry, his son-in-law, has said this. The whole opening idea of the show is built on it. 20 years of being gone. 20 years of nobody knowing where he was. But the Morty currently living in that house is 14 years old. If Rick was gone for 20 years and Morty is only 14, there is no version of this timeline in which Rick was around for Morty as a baby. A baby Morty would have been born about 6 years after Rick walked away from the family. There is no honest reason for Rick to be holding an infant version of his current grandson in any photo, anywhere, at any point in the past. He simply was not there. And yet, there he is, in the picture on Bird Person's wall, grinning, with a tiny Morty in his arms. So either the show made a mistake, or that baby Morty in the picture is not the same Morty currently living in the house. He is somebody else. A Morty from a different time, a different place, a different version of the family. A Morty whose existence the show has not yet bothered to explain. Once you start tugging on that thread, more loose ends come along behind it. There is a moment in another episode, set inside the Citadel, where Morty is captured by other Ricks and forced to give his name. He says, with a little pride, that he is Morty C137. He is using the same dimension number Rick uses for himself. He is saying, basically, that he is the grandson of the most famous Rick in the multiverse. The Ricks in the room react in a strange way. Two of them glance at each other. They take a small pause. They do not openly correct him. They do not call him a liar. But the look on their faces is the look of people who have just heard a small, quiet impossibility. The reason that look might fit there is buried in the show's own rules. The Citadel, as the the show has slowly explained, knows everything about every Rick and every Morty in the walled-off slice of reality it controls. It tracks them, it records them, it sells them, it buys them. The Citadel knows, beyond any question, which Mortys naturally exist in which dimensions. And in dimension C137, the dimension Rick C137 was actually born into, the dimension where Diane and Beth were killed, no Morty exists at all. There is no naturally occurring Morty in C137. Beth died as a child. She never grew up. She never had kids. There never was, and never could be, a Morty C137 born under the normal rules of that world. So when a Morty walks into the Citadel and announces himself as Morty C137, two Ricks look at each other and take a pause, because, by the rules they know, this kid should not exist. There are smaller hints, too. A licensed mobile game built around the show, a spin-off thing that Adult Swim itself put together, gives the show's Morty a different dimension number from his Rick. He is listed there as coming from C145, not C137. Many fans have written this off as just a small slip from the people who made the game, but others have looked at it as a quiet whisper from somebody close to the show, leaving a little crumb on the floor for anyone who cares to pick it up. There is also the matter of the voucher. In that early Citadel episode, the same one that introduced Eye Patch Morty in the back of the crowd, Rick C137 is offered a kind of receipt at the end of the day. The Citadel routinely hands out vouchers to Ricks who have lost their Mortys, allowing them to claim a new Morty from the Morty stock at any time. Rick is offered one of these vouchers as a courtesy. He turns it down. He says he does not need a new one. The moment is played mostly as a joke, but underneath the joke is a strange little fact. Rick is being offered a fresh Morty, as if he might want one. He treats the idea casually, the way someone treats a thing they have already done once before, the way a man at a counter politely refuses a free refill of something he has already had. This is the case the theory makes. It says that, somewhere in the past, somewhere off-screen, somewhere before the very first scene of the very first episode of the show, Rick C137 already had a Morty. A real, original Morty. A Morty he raised. A Morty he traveled with. A Morty he, for some reason, no longer has. That Morty is the one in the photograph on Bird Person's wall. That Morty is the one whose existence makes a Morty C137 even possible. And that Morty, somehow, is no longer with him. The current Morty, the boy in the kitchen eating cereal, the boy who got dragged on his first adventure in the very first episode, is, in this reading, a replacement. A Morty who was already living quietly in the Prime Dimension, in this borrowed family, before Rick ever knocked on the door. A Morty who happened to be the right age, the right shape, the right blank slate for Rick to slot himself in beside. Some smaller details support that picture too. In the very first episode of the show, the very first time Morty rides in the space cruiser, he reacts to Rick the way a stranger reacts to a stranger. He does not know the controls. He does not know the rules. He does not know the patterns. He treats the whole thing like he has never done any of it before, because, in the simple reading, he never has. He has just met his grandfather. The early seasons make a real point of how new their dynamic is. Both characters are figuring each other out from scratch. Compare that to a different Morty who shows up later in the show. Eye Patch Morty, the boy in the eye patch, the boy who eventually breaks the wall around the multiverse. Eye Patch Morty is presented from his very first frame as something different, smarter, calmer, more aware, more confident with weapons, more confident with politics, more confident with strategy. He is so unusual that the entire Citadel takes years to even realize he is real. There are some fans who, looking at the gap between Eye Patch Morty and the show's regular Morty, have come to a strange conclusion. They have started to argue that the boy in the eye patch is not just any other Morty. He is, in this reading, the original Morty Rick C137 was supposed to grow up with. The Morty in the photograph on Bird Person's wall. In that version of the theory, the story underneath the show is even sadder than the story on top of it. It goes like this. Rick C137 had a Morty once. A real one, long ago. He raised that Morty. He fed him. He took him on adventures. The Morty grew up smart, maybe too smart. Smart enough to start questioning Rick. Smart enough to start pushing back. Smart enough to start seeing, very clearly, what kind of man his grandfather actually was. Rick, for whatever reason, walked away from him, or got rid of him, or replaced him. Either way, he ended up alone. That abandoned Morty grew up alone. He grew up angry. He grew up patient. He grew up willing to spend a very long time getting back at the man who threw him away. Eventually, he put on an eye patch, took control of his Rick, and started building a quiet plan. The plan, when it finally finished, was not just to escape the Citadel. It was to walk back into Rick's life, to find Rick C137, to stand across a dinner table from him, to hold the cards Rick had spent spent 40 years pretending nobody could ever hold against him, and to look his grandfather in the face, finally, and let him know that all of this, all of the politics, all of the killing, all of the wall breaking, all of it had been a long, slow game between an old man and the grandson he had thrown out. In the canon of the show, as it stands, the writers have given Eye Patch Morty a different official origin. They showed him in flashback as a regular Morty from a regular dimension who one day got fed up with his Rick and built an eye patch to take control. That official origin is the one the show treats as true. But fans who hold to the older theory point out, fairly, that one truth does not erase the other. Eye Patch Morty's flashback only explains the day he put on the eye patch. It does not explain everything that came before that day. It does not explain why the song most tied to him, the song that plays whenever he wins something, the song called For the Damaged Coda, sounds like a lullaby for a child who was abandoned a long time ago. It does not explain the photograph on Bird Person's wall. It does not explain why two Ricks looked at each other when the show's Morty said his dimension number out loud. Some fans believe there are two Mortys hiding inside one story, the boy in the kitchen, the boy in the eye patch, the replacement and the original. The kid Rick is raising now, the kid Rick used to raise. One forgiven without ever knowing he was a stand-in. The other, waiting, very patiently, for Rick to admit that the math of his own life never quite added up. Whether any of it is true, the show may never say. The point of the theory is not really to be settled. The point of it is to give a strange, soft weight to every quiet scene where the show's Morty looks up at his grandfather with full, simple love, and Rick looks back with something that is just a little bit too sad to be just love in return. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. There are other versions of this kind of thing scattered through the show. A second, related theory, even bigger than the first, picks up exactly where the photograph on Bird Person's wall fades out, and asks a much darker question about who the original abandoned grandson grew up to become. Section 8. Evil Morty. Is Rick's original grandson? The first theory leaves a question hanging in the air. If the Morty in the photograph on Bird Person's wall is a different boy from the Morty currently eating cereal at the breakfast table, then what happened to him? Where did the original Morty go? Did he die in some forgotten adventure? Did Rick lose him in a fight? Did Rick simply get bored and walk away, the way he walks away from most things in his life eventually? The most popular guess fans have made over the years is that he did not die. He did not get lost. He did not vanish. He grew up. He got smart. He got tired. He put on an eye patch. This is the theory at the center of the whole multiverse, the one that has been kicking around online for almost 10 years now. The idea is that the boy in the eye patch, the boy who eventually walks the show's Rick into a meat grinder of a city in the sky, is the original Morty Rick C137 once raised. The grandson he loved, the grandson he failed, the grandson he threw away, the grandson who waited. Once you stack the clues up next to each other, the picture starts to take shape. The first big clue is the song. When the show first introduces the boy in the eye patch, way back at the end of the first season, the music underneath that scene is unusual. It is a slow, sad, almost lullaby-like piece called For the Damaged Coda. The song is by a band called Blonde Redhead. The choice of song was, on its own, a strange one. The eye patch Morty has barely done anything at this point. He is a small mystery in the back of a crowd. Most shows would not bother giving such a minor character such a heavy emotional theme. The song was, in its way, a tip-off. The writers were saying, very quietly, that this character carries a weight the audience does not yet understand. The same song comes back, again and again, every time he is on screen. It plays at the end of his episode in Season 3, when he wins the election and kills the council. It plays in Season 5, when he reveals the wall around the multiverse. It plays in soft, broken pieces in Season 7, when he steps back into Rick's life. The song is his marker, his ghost, the thing the writers reach for whenever the camera lands on him. The lyrics, taken plainly, are about a damaged person, a person who has been hurt in some old, deep way, a person who carries something inside them that nobody else can quite see. The chorus, in simple words, talks about being broken, about feeling unloved, about being a damaged thing that someone else made damaged. It is not a song you reach for when writing a regular bad guy. It is a song you reach for when writing a character whose pain is, in some real way, the fault of someone the audience already knows. For most of the show's run, the only person old enough and close enough to be that someone is Rick. The second clue is the look in his eye. When the boy in the eye patch finally has a long sit-down conversation with Rick C137 near the end of Season 5, the audience expects something cold, something cruel, something dramatic. What they get instead is something stranger. Eye Patch Morty does not act like a stranger. He does not look at Rick the way most villains look at the hero of a show. He talks to Rick with a kind of quiet, exhausted patience, the way a grown child talks to the parent who let them down. He tells Rick that he is not interested interested in killing him. He tells Rick that he wants to be free of him. He tells Rick, almost gently, that being sick of Rick is the only thing that makes a Morty evil. That is not the language of a stranger. That is the language of someone who has known a very specific person for a very long time and has finally given up on getting anything good from them. The third clue is the gap between him and every other Morty. The show, by this point, has put many Mortys on screen. Mortys in the Citadel, Mortys in the Morty market, Mortys in the slums, Mortys at school, Mortys in factories, Mortys in farms. The whole point of the Citadel is that there are millions of Mortys, and they are, by design, mostly the same. Forgiving, loyal, easy to push around, trained to be agreeable, bred for it. Eye Patch Morty is none of those things. He is patient where they are anxious. He is calm where they are jumpy. He is willing to plan over the course of years where they have trouble planning past the next meal. He is willing to wait, alone, for entire seasons of showtime, without anyone to talk to, without praise, without comfort, while a plan slowly comes together in his head. He is, by every honest measure the show has given the audience, an outlier, a one of a kind. The simplest way to explain that gap is to say that he was raised differently. Raised, perhaps, by a Rick who actually paid attention. A Rick who taught him things. A Rick who took him on real adventures and gave him real weapons and let him see the real shape of the multiverse instead of dragging him along like luggage. The kind of Rick that, for a brief, shining stretch a long time ago, the original Rick C137 might have actually tried to be. That kind of upbringing would also explain why he hates Rick so deeply now. The cruelest betrayal in any story is the betrayal of someone who used to be loved well. A child who was raised badly from the start has nothing to compare it to. A child who was raised tenderly for a while and then thrown out knows exactly what was taken away. The fourth clue is the obsession. Eye Patch Morty does not, in the show, hate every Rick equally. He hates the system. He hates the Citadel. He hates the wall around the multiverse. But when it comes to one specific Rick, his attention is sharper. He keeps coming back to Rick C137. He frames Rick C137 for murder in Season 1. He uses Rick C137 specifically as the brain to scan in Season 5. He shows up in Rick C137's life again in Season 7, even though he has already escaped the wall, even though he has already won, even though there is no good reason for him to ever look at Rick C137 again. He keeps coming back. He keeps lingering. He keeps making sure Rick C137 is in the room when the big things happen. A villain who simply hates the system would not need that level of personal contact with one particular Rick. A grandson who has unfinished business with one particular grandfather very much would. There is also a small, almost throwaway moment in the show where this whole reading gets a quiet thumbs up from the writers themselves. In one early episode, Rick warns the show's Morty, almost in passing, that he should not let himself get too smart. He says it quietly. He says it like a man who has seen this happen before. He says it like a man who has, at some point in his life, watched a Morty grow up smart and not enjoyed how that ended. The line is small enough to miss on a first watch. It is large enough, on a second watch, to feel like a confession. The writers later acknowledged in interviews that the line was meant to plant a seed for what Eye Patch Morty would eventually become. The line, in plain words, says that a smart Morty is a dangerous thing. The line is delivered by a man who, in this reading, already knows that from experience. The fifth clue is how the show frames Rick's reaction to Eye Patch Morty in their final scenes together. The 7th season does not show Rick treating Eye Patch Morty the way he treats his other enemies. With Rick Prime, the ending is rage, bare hands, wet, ugly violence. With Eye Patch Morty, when the moment comes for them to part, Rick simply lets him walk away. He does not chase him, he does not curse him, he does not threaten him. He stands there, bloody, watching the boy step through a portal and disappear, with an expression on his face that the audience has never quite seen on Rick before. It is the look of a man who has decided to let something go that he has no real right to hold on to in the first place. That is how a parent looks at a grown child who has finally walked out for good. Now, the show has also given Eye Patch Morty a more official origin. Season 7 shows, in flashback, a regular Morty from a regular dimension who got fed up one day, built the eye patch, scalped his Rick, and walked out into the world. The writers presented this as the truth of how Eye Patch Morty came to be. The theory, however, takes that flashback and folds it neatly into itself instead of fighting against it. The point fans have made is that the flashback only shows the day the eye patch went on. It does not show every day before that day. It does not show what kind of childhood that Morty had. It does not show what kind of Rick raised him. It does not show whether that Rick was Rick C137 or some other version. The flashback closes
closes the door on one specific question and quietly leaves a dozen other doors open. Something else happened to that Morty before he reached the breaking point. The flashback does not say what. If the Morty in the flashback is the same Morty as the one in the photograph on Bird Person's wall, then the story stays clean. Rick C137 raised a Morty long ago. He took him on adventures. He grew bored or careless or cruel, the way Ricks do.
He hurt the boy in some way the show has not yet described. He let him go, or ran from him, or lost him. The boy ended up in some other dimension, with some other Rick, who picked up the same patterns and made things worse. One day the boy snapped. He built the eye patch. He took control. He slipped into the Citadel. He vanished into the crowd. And then, very slowly, very patiently, he started rebuilding his life around a single goal. Not just to take down the Citadel, not just to escape the wall, to one day stand across a dinner table from the original Rick, to make him sit, to make him watch, to make him understand, finally, what it had cost his first grandson to be left behind. If that reading is right, every quiet, sad moment between Rick and Eye Patch Morty in the show takes on a different shape. The patience he shows when explaining the wall around the multiverse stops being the patience of a stranger and becomes the patience of someone who has already explained things to Rick 100 times before. The choice to walk away, instead of killing Rick when he had the chance, stops being mercy and starts being the harder thing, which is forgiveness, or something close to it. The decision to come back in Season 7, to help Rick take down Rick Prime, stops being a strange tactical choice and starts being a son helping his father bury an old enemy. Even the song lands differently, for the damaged coda, played softly under the boy in the eye patch, stops being the theme of a faceless villain. It becomes a lullaby for a child who was loved once and let down and never quite got over it. The reason this theory has stayed alive for almost a decade, even as the show has tried to give Eye Patch Morty a different official backstory, is simple. The shape of the show makes more sense with the theory in place than without it. Rick's guilt makes more sense. Eye Patch Morty's patience makes more sense. The song makes more sense. The photograph makes more sense. The whole quiet, painful weight that hangs around the boy in the eye patch every time he is on screen makes more sense. A villain who just hates the system would not need to feel that heavy. A grandson who was failed by the only family he ever had would. It is a story the show might never confirm out loud. It might never be made plain. The writers might keep telling it sideways forever. But for the people who have been watching Rick and Morty since the very first season, who have been chewing on small detail after small detail for years, the theory has become a kind of soft second story underneath the official one. A version of the show in which the smartest man in any room, the one who built the wall around reality, the one who killed Rick Prime with his bare hands, the one who finally let go of Diane, might one day, in a quiet moment, have to admit that the worst thing he ever lost was not his wife at all. The worst thing he ever lost might have been a small, smart boy with messy hair who looked up at him once with simple love and got nothing in return. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. Whether any of that is true, the strangest theory of all says it might never have mattered in the first place, because, according to a much older and much weirder idea, none of these things ever really happened. The whole show, every season, every adventure, every word, may have been taking place inside a box on a desk on a strange alien spaceship that Rick was never allowed to leave. Section 9. Rick never escaped the Zigerian simulation. Picture a small spaceship, bright lights, plastic chairs, a handful of nervous green aliens with very large eyes, the kind of creatures who look like they have been failing at their jobs for a very long time. These aliens are called the Zigerians. They show up in the 4th episode of the very first season of the show. The episode is called M. Night Shyamalan Aliens. The title, a small joke aimed at the famous director who loves twist endings. The plot is simple. The Zigerians, the show explains, are the galaxy's most ambitious and least successful con artists. They survive by tricking smart beings out of valuable secrets. Their favorite tool is a fake reality. They build little bubbles of pretend life around their targets, run the targets through their normal day, and wait for the target to slip up and reveal whatever piece of information the Zigerians need. On this particular day, they have set their sights on Rick. The thing they want from him is the recipe for a special kind of fuel, a super rich, super dense source of power called concentrated dark matter. Rick is one of the only beings in the multiverse who knows how to make it. The Zigerians have spent a long time setting their trap. They have built a tiny copy of Earth inside their ship, a tiny copy of Rick's house, a tiny copy of Rick's family, a tiny copy of Rick's whole boring everyday life. They snatch Rick out of bed in the middle of the night, drop him into the simulation, and wait for him to start his morning routine like nothing has changed. Rick figures it out almost immediately. He always does. He drags Morty out of bed, tells him they are inside a fake world and starts breaking the rules of the place to mess with it. Cars drive on the ceiling. Animals walk through walls. Little kids float in the air. Numbers on math tests get scrambled. Rick uses Morty as his canary because Morty's brain is simple enough that any cracks in the simulation will throw him off in obvious ways. The two of them stage a fake escape. They climb out of the simulation and stand on what looks like the floor of the alien ship. They start celebrating. They strike a triumphant pose. The episode could end right there. It does not. The walls around them peel away. It turns out the first simulation was hiding inside a second simulation. The fake Earth was inside a fake spaceship. The escape was part of the trap. The Zigerians had been counting on Rick figuring out the first layer in order to lull him into thinking he had won. The second layer is more subtle, cleaner, harder to catch. The trick is that the Zigerians can keep listening to him as long as he believes he is free. Rick figures that one out too. He stages another fake escape. The walls peel away again. Inside the second simulation was a third, and inside the third was a fourth. By the end of the episode, Rick is bouncing through layer after layer of nested fake worlds, each one slightly more convincing than the last, each one designed to catch him after the previous one fails. The Zigerians are pumping every resource they have into stacking these realities on top of each other. The tension of the episode is no longer about whether Rick will escape. It is about how many layers there really are. The episode ends with Rick, supposedly, finally breaking out. He tricks the Zigerians into blowing up their own ship. He returns home. He climbs into bed. The credits roll. That is where the show ends the episode. That is where the theory starts. The theory is older than most of the others. It says, very plainly, that Rick never actually escaped. The last simulation he broke through was not the last one. There was one more layer waiting for him. A simulation so good, he never noticed. He woke up in his bed, told himself he had won, told Morty everything was fine, and walked back into the house thinking he was free. He was not free. He has not been free since. In this reading, every single thing that has happened in the show after that moment, every adventure, every villain, every season, every laugh, every quiet, sad scene at the dinner table, every fight with Jerry, every adventure with Bird Person, the whole Citadel, the whole Galactic Federation, the whole long hunt for Rick Prime, the death of Rick Prime, the central finite curve, the boy in the eye patch, the breakdown over Diane in Season 8, the memory Rick hiding in Jerry's head, all of it. Every minute of every episode has been the Zigerians still running their simulation in the background, still waiting, still listening, still hoping that one day Rick will let his guard down and write the recipe for concentrated dark matter on a napkin somewhere. It sounds like a small idea at first. It gets bigger the longer you sit with it. The first thing that holds it up is the way Rick reacts to the Zigerians in the original episode. Rick is, by the show's own rules, the most paranoid creature in any reality. He checks everything, he doubts everything, he suspects everything. The simulation episode has him checking and rechecking layer after layer, each escape met with another bout of paranoia. Then, in the final scene, the show asks the audience to believe that he simply stopped checking. He went home, he went to sleep, he woke up, he acted normal. Anyone who has watched Rick for a single episode knows that Rick does not stop checking. Not after one fake reality, not after two, certainly not after a whole nested stack of them. A man who has been tricked 4 times in a single morning is not a man who simply forgets to test the floor when he gets home. The fact that he is shown doing exactly that, no questions asked, in the final scene of that episode is the kind of thing that fans took as a hidden tell from the writers. The second thing that holds the theory up is the strange, suspicious shape of every world Rick visits after that day. The multiverse in the show is always conveniently friendly to Rick. He is the smartest man in every room he enters. He is the most powerful being in every fight he picks. Every science problem has a solution he already knows. Every villain has a weakness he can exploit. Every government turns out to have an exploit hidden somewhere. Every reality, no matter how strange, eventually bends to him. That is, in the official version of the story, because of the wall called the central finite curve. The wall locks Rick inside a part of reality where he is, by design, the smartest. The wall explains, neatly, why Rick is always on top. But in the simulation reading, the explanation is even simpler. Of course he is always on top. He is in a simulation. The simulation is being run by people who want him to feel comfortable. They want him to relax. They want him to settle in. They want him to feel like the universe is his playground. Because a relaxed Rick is a Rick who eventually slips up and gives them what they want. In this reading, the wall is just a story the simulation tells him to explain why life is so easy. The third thing that supports the theory is something the show itself does in Season 6. There is an episode in the 6th season called Rick, A Mort Well Lived. The plot involves Morty's mind getting split up among the many fake people who live inside a video game. Rick has to enter the game to save him. Inside the game, the people start arguing over religion. They start having theological debates. They start wondering whether their world is real or whether it is being run by some larger being outside the game. The whole episode is a very long, very specific argument that simulation theory and religion are basically the same idea. The creator of the show, Dan Harmon, talked about this episode openly afterward. He said in a behind-the-scenes interview that he wanted to explore the way simulation theory and organized religion are almost the same thing wearing different costumes. Both ideas, in his telling, suggest that the world the people inside it experience is not the real world. Both suggest that there is a bigger, truer story happening somewhere else. Both suggest that the meaning of any single life is much smaller than it feels from the inside. The fact that the show went to that much trouble to talk about simulation theory in a whole episode, decades later, is a small fingerprint. The writers are clearly thinking about these ideas. They are clearly comfortable letting them sit at the edges of the show. They are clearly willing to play with the possibility that the whole reality the audience is watching might be sitting inside something bigger. The fourth thing that supports the theory is a small set of details from the Zigerian episode itself that fans have pointed at for years. In one moment of the episode, while Rick and Morty are inside one of the simulations, Rick gives Morty a noogie on the head. He rubs his hand around in Morty's hair. The noogie is presented as a goof, out of character, the kind of thing Rick almost never does. Some viewers on rewatch started noticing how often the camera lingers on Morty's hair in that scene. They started noticing how often Rick reaches for it. They started noticing how, even in the supposed final scene of the episode, when Rick is back home in the real world, he reaches for Morty's hair again, just to touch it, almost without thinking. A small theory inside the larger theory says that Rick was checking the simulation by feel. Hair, in computer-generated worlds, is one of the hardest things to render correctly. It takes a lot of processing power. It often comes out feeling slightly wrong. Rick, who knows this, may have been running a simple test every time he reached for Morty. If the hair felt right, the simulation was good. If the hair felt wrong, the simulation had cracks. In that final scene, when Rick is back home, he reaches for the hair. The show pauses for a beat too long on the touch, and then Rick smiles. The smile is a strange smile, a little tight, a little forced, the kind of smile a man might give if he had just realized something terrible and decided not to say it out loud. This reading suggests that Rick did the test. The hair felt right, maybe too right, maybe perfectly right. The simulation was good enough that the test could no longer catch it, and Rick, knowing he had no way to fight an opponent that good, simply chose to stop fighting. He smiled. He made his peace with the fact that he might be living inside a box. He went on with his life because the alternative was to spend the rest of his existence checking every wall. The fifth thing that holds the theory up is the texture of Rick's behavior after the Zigerian episode. Once you put on the lens of the simulation theory, certain things about Rick start to look different. The drinking, for one. The drinking gets heavier as the show goes on. A man who suspects he is inside a fake world has a very good reason to want to stay drunk most of the time. The flask is a way of softening reality without ever having to admit out loud that reality might not be real. The way Rick treats the people around him also fits. He keeps them at arm's length. He tells himself he does not love them. He tells himself they are replaceable. He treats his own family like a thing he can leave at any moment for any reason. Some of that is just grief. Some of it is just trauma from losing Diane. But part of it could also be the slow, soft suspicion that none of the people around him are really there at all. That they are programs. That Beth is a face on a screen. That Morty is a string of numbers in a machine. That nothing he does to any of them counts in the way it would count in a real world. The theory takes the cruelty of Rick and gives it a softer reading. He is not cruel because he does not care. He is cruel because, deep down, he is no longer sure that anyone he is being cruel to actually exists. The biggest thing the theory does, when you really sit with it, is take everything heavy in the show and make it light. If Rick never left the simulation, then Diane was never really lost. Rick Prime was never a real person. The Citadel was never built. The wall was never put up. Eye Patch Morty was never abandoned. The whole tower of grief and revenge and family pain that the show has spent over a decade building is just data. A long, beautiful, sad set of dreams running inside a dying alien ship somewhere, while a few green con artists watch on a tiny screen and wait for one drunk old man to slip up and write down a recipe. For some fans, that is comforting. For some, it is the most horrifying
chilling reading the show has. There is something gentle in the idea that none of the pain on screen is real. There is also something terrible in the idea that the love is not real either. That Beth's hand on Rick's shoulder is not a hand. That Morty's small voice in the kitchen is not a voice. That the whole long and tender road Rick has been walking, from the bomb in the garage to the tiny digital pocket where he set Memory Diane free, is happening inside a tank that nobody outside the tank cares about. The theory does not need the show to confirm it to keep its grip. It feeds on the same quiet uncertainty that simulation theory feeds on in real life. Once you start asking whether your world is real, you do not stop. The question stays open behind every door for the rest of the time you are alive. For Rick, in this reading, the question is also open. The bottle helps. The grandson helps. The adventures help. The big, quiet, sad moments at dinner tables across multiple seasons are the closest thing he can give himself to truth, even if the table itself is just code. The simulation makes the show feel, in a strange way, gentler, smaller, softer, less heavy. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. The next theory does the opposite. The next theory takes the smallest, gentlest, most harmless character in the entire show, the one nobody worries about, the one who pops up in season finales to wave goodbye to the audience, and quietly suggests that he might be the most dangerous thing the multiverse has ever produced. Section 10. Mr. Poopy Butthole is the real final villain. He looks like a peanut. That is the cheap, easy way to describe him. A small, round, cream-colored creature with a friendly face, 2 little arms, 2 little legs, a top hat now and then, and a sweater vest. He is harmless looking. He is, by every visible measure, the softest character on the show. A cuddly little side guy. The kind of figure a child might draw in the corner of a notebook just for fun. His name is Mr. Poopy Butthole. The name itself is a joke. The character was meant, originally, to be a one-time gag. He showed up for the first time in the second season of the show in an episode called Total Recall. The plot of that episode is one of the show's strangest. Alien parasites have invaded the family home. The parasites work by inserting themselves into the family's memories, making each person believe the parasite is an old friend. The trick is that the parasites can only plant good memories. They cannot plant bad ones. So the way the family figures out who is real and who is fake by the end of the episode is by checking which characters they have any negative memories of. The real people in their life have, of course, hurt them at some point. The parasites have not. Mr. Poopy Butthole is in the house during this whole episode. The family treats him like an old friend. They have memories of him going back years. He plays cards with them. He shares dinner with them. He hangs around in the background of every scene. By every test the family uses inside the episode, he should be a parasite. He has no bad memories with anyone. He is too kind. He is too nice. In the final moments of the episode, after the family has killed every other character they cannot remember being mean to, Beth turns the gun on Mr. Poopy Butthole. She is sure, by their own rules, that he is one of the parasites. She fires. He is not a parasite. He is a real, longtime friend of the family. The bullet hits him. He bleeds. The family screams. He is rushed to the hospital. He survives. The episode ends with Beth quietly horrified at what she has done. Mr. Poopy Butthole, in the months that follow, recovers, marries a woman named Amy, has a baby, and starts dropping in for visits in the seasons after. That is the official version. A nice, round little man. A friend of the family. A small, bright spot in a very dark show. The theory takes that picture and quietly turns it on its head. It starts with a question that has been bugging fans for years. Where, exactly, did Mr. Poopy Butthole come from? The show has never given a clean answer. He is one of the only characters in the entire series whose origin has been left almost completely blank. The audience knows nothing about his species, his home planet, his early life, his parents, his family tree. He simply appears, in the second season, fully formed, already an old friend of the Smiths, already comfortable in the house, already loved. That alone would be a strange detail. The show is almost too careful with origin stories. Rick has one, Beth has one, Bird Person has one, Squanchy has one. Even side characters like Mr. Nimbus have a history the show explains at length. Mr. Poopy Butthole, the friendliest character of the bunch, is a blank. The show has never even named his species in any clear, official way. What the show has done, instead, over many seasons, is slowly let the audience see that something about him is not quite right. In season 2, he is a happy little man with a happy little family. He marries Amy. They have a son named Poopy Jr. He sits in the post-credits of season finales and waves at the audience and tells them the show will be back soon. In season 3, the cracks begin. He shows up in the post-credits
post-credits scene of the season finale and admits, almost casually, that Amy has left him. She has taken the baby. He is alone now. He says it lightly. The audience laughs. The show moves on. In season 4, he returns as a college professor. He is teaching a class. The class turns on him. He fights them off. The episode treats it as a joke, but the man on screen is now a noticeably less stable person than the one who married Amy in season 2. In season 5, in the post-credits of Rick Mirai Jack, he tells the audience why Amy left. He explains, slowly, that he started shutting her out. He stopped telling her what he was feeling. He started showing her a polished version of himself that did not match the man he was inside. He says it with sadness. The audience laughs less. The show keeps moving. In season 6, in the post-credits, he has gone full obsession. He is muscling himself up at the gym. He is lifting too much weight. He cracks his own legs trying to squat too heavy. He cries out for Amy from the floor. The joke is now a portrait of a man falling apart. In season 7, he gets a whole episode of his own. The show stages an intervention for him. Rick gathers his old friends, Bird Person, Squanchy, Gene, Gearhead. They all sit Mr. Poopy Butthole down and try to help him move on from his ex-wife. He refuses. He runs away from them. He breaks into Amy's house. He kidnaps his own son. He gets into a fight with Amy's new partner, an alien who is also a predator-style hunter. By the end of the episode, he agrees to step back, leave Amy alone, and try to work on himself. He does not work on himself. In the post-credits of the very same season, in the 7th season finale, he reveals to the audience that he has stolen one of Rick's portal guns. He says it casually, into the camera, like a joke. He says he has decided that he wants his old life back, no matter what. He uses the portal gun to travel into a different version of reality, a dimension where some other version of him is still happily married to a version of Amy. He sneaks into that dimension's house. He knocks the other version of himself unconscious. He shoves that other version through the portal back into the original world, along with the portal gun. Then he sits down at the dinner table in the new dimension with the new Amy and pretends to be her husband. The new Amy kisses him. The show holds on her face for a long beat. She squints. She tilts her head. She knows immediately that something is wrong. The man across the table from her is not quite the man she married. The dinner ends. The episode ends. The show goes on. That post-credit scene, by itself, is one of the most unsettling things the show has ever quietly slipped past its audience. The smallest, sweetest character in the whole multiverse has just committed what is essentially a kidnapping. He has replaced an innocent man in his own life. He has stepped into another being's marriage and intends to live there for the rest of his days. He has done all of this with no warning, no apparent guilt, and a friendly little smile. The 8th season then drops in the year 2025 with a finale called Hot Rick. Most of that episode is Rick's story. The Memory Rick subplot, Beth almost taking her own life in the basement, Rick removing his last memory of Diane. The big emotional beats of the show's most recent ending. All of that has been covered already. The final scene of the episode is from Mr. Poopy Butthole. The post-credits, as always, opens with him talking to the camera. He thanks the audience for tuning in. He says his favorite episode of the season was the one where Jerry turned into the Easter Bunny. He chats. He smiles. He waves. The camera pulls back. The audience sees, slowly, that Mr. Poopy Butthole is not actually talking to anyone. He is being filmed. The footage is being played back on a monitor. The monitor is sitting in a sterile lab. The lab is full of scientists in white coats. The scientists are gathered around a single woman who is staring at the screen with the kind of patient, hard expression that almost no character in the show has ever worn. The woman is Amy. It is the new Amy. The Amy from the dimension Mr. Poopy Butthole sneaked into. The same Amy who tilted her head at her husband over dinner and knew, in one beat, that he was wrong. She has, in the time between season 7 and season 8, been doing her homework. She has, behind his back, been collecting evidence. She has, very quietly, been building a case. And she has done it, the show suggests, by going to scientists. The kind of scientists who have access to equipment most people in any reality cannot get their hands on. The scientists explain to her in plain words what their machines are reading. They tell her, with a strange and chilling calm, that the man she has been living with does not match her dimension. They use a very specific set of words. They say that his atomic vibrations do not match anything in their reality. That is unusual language for the show. The words come out flat and matter of fact. There is no joke under them. There is no wink. There is no comic music. The scientists are being plain. The reading on their machine is not a normal multiverse reading. The man on screen is not just from somewhere else. He is from somewhere strange. Somewhere off the map of the dimensions the show has spent 8 seasons describing. The choice of words matters. The show could easily have said his readings did not match this universe, or this dimension, or this timeline. It did not. It said reality. A different reality. A reality apart from the one Amy is in. The phrase floats in the air of that final scene like a small, careful flag. This is what the theory pulls on. The central finite curve, the wall the Citadel built around the slice of the multiverse where Rick is the smartest being, is a wall. It cuts off one section of reality from another. Inside the curve, every Rick is on top. Every Morty is bred. Every adventure happens within a controlled, walled-off zone. Outside the curve is everything else. Most of the multiverse. The big, real one. The one Eye Patch Morty walked into at the end of Season 5. The Amy on screen, with her sterile lab and her hard expression, is, by every reading the show has put forward, inside the curve. Her dimension is one of the dimensions the family has lived next to all this time. The fact that her scientists cannot match Mr. Poopy Butthole's readings to anything in their reality is a careful, quiet hint that the man on screen is not from inside the curve at all. Mr. Poopy Butthole, in this reading, originally came from outside the wall. He has been living inside the curve in a borrowed life for the entire run of the show. He showed up in the second season with no backstory, with no species, with no origin. He inserted himself into a family. He knew them well enough to be remembered as an old friend. He survived a bullet. He married into the local population. He had a son. He hung around in the background of finales. He was, all along, a quiet observer, sitting at the edge of every important moment in the lives of Rick and the family. He has been watching them from inside their own house for the entire show. When his marriage in the original dimension collapsed, he did not deal with it the way a normal character deals with a normal heartbreak. He stole a portal gun. He hopped dimensions. He replaced another man in another marriage. He treated entire lives as things he could pick up and put down. That is not the behavior of a soft little side character. That is the behavior of a being for whom dimensions are simply rooms. That kind of behavior fits a being from outside the curve. A being from the much larger, much stranger multiverse that lies beyond the wall the Ricks built. A being for whom the rules the Citadel set up are not rules at all. The rules of the curve only bind the people inside it. Anyone from outside it can walk in and out of dimensions the same way the audience walks from one room of their house to another. The theory takes that quiet detail and runs with it. It says that Mr. Poopy Butthole has been here in the show since the second season for a reason. The reason is not friendship. The reason is something darker. He may have been studying the family. He may have been studying Rick. He may have been waiting for some specific thing the family is going to do or has already done that matters in a much bigger story being told outside the curve. He may be a scout. He may be a witness. He may be something else entirely, something the show has not yet given a name to. The other piece of the theory ties Mr. Poopy Butthole to Diane. Diane was erased from every reality inside the curve. The Omega device was used to wipe her out, and it worked. There is no Diane left anywhere, in any dimension Rick can portal to, anywhere inside the wall. If a Diane still exists somewhere outside the wall, then bringing her back becomes a possibility nobody inside the curve can pull off on their own. The only way to find her, in this reading, is to find someone with access to the bigger world, someone who knows the territory, someone who has been quietly walking between the inside of the curve and the outside of it for years. A small, round, friendly-looking little man with a name that is a joke. A man with no clear origin. A man who can step in and out of marriages the way other beings step in and out of rooms. A man who is now, as of the most recent season finale, sitting in a lab where someone has finally figured out he is not from around here. The theory does not say, plainly, what Mr. Poopy Butthole's plan is. It does not need to. The point of the theory is the shape of him. A character introduced as a one-time gag. A character whose name is the goofiest in the show. A character the audience has been laughing at for a decade. Quietly, slowly, episode by episode. That character has been turned into the only being on the show who has been everywhere the family has been. Who has been trusted by the family without question. Who has shown himself willing to swap one whole life for another the moment his own life stops working. And who, the show now openly states, does not match the rules of the reality everyone else lives in. The next season of the show, season 9, has been announced. It is set to begin in May of 2026. The show has been renewed by the network for several more seasons after that. The story is far from over. Whatever happens next, the small round man in the sweater vest is sitting in a lab, on a screen, being studied by the people he tried to fool. The little goofy gag from a decade ago is now a thread the show has very deliberately left dangling. The thread leads somewhere outside the wall, somewhere the show has not yet shown. 7 seasons of grief, 8 of revenge, hundreds of adventures, one
one bomb in a garage, one wall around the multiverse, one eye patch, one wife erased from every reality, one letting go in a quiet basement, one peanut-shaped friend in a sterile lab. Somewhere out there, beyond every door the show has opened, the rest of the multiverse is still waiting. Bigger than the cage Rick built, bigger than the chase he ran, bigger than the family he found, bigger than any of it. And the strangest part of the whole long story is that Rick, for once, is not the one looking at it. For now, he is at the dinner table, the Beths are with him, Morty is across from him, Jerry is somewhere in the kitchen, Bug Ann is on her way back to her own people, Memory Diane is drifting peacefully in a small private pocket of reality with the better version of him she always deserved. The man who lost everything has put down the last piece of it on purpose. If you enjoyed this video essay, make sure to subscribe. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.